All right, so I am admittedly the byproduct of a high school calculus teacher and a fitness instructor slash gym owner. So by the end of this lecture, we're going to have a little calculus lesson. Should be fun. It's going to be difficult to follow up the cosmic meaning of life. Actually, speaking of Soli, one of my favorite lectures from our previous presentation lives was on the stress recovery adaptation model, and in particular your explanation of the usefulness of models. And so what I intend to do with this presentation is share with you all a model that I use to inform my coaching, to be a better coach and to continuously improve. But before I get into that, I want to share a story. As I was building this lecture or this presentation, I flashed back to my first job, which was actually as a 1099 contractor. At 13 years old, I started a paper route. Back in the day when you would throw on the double-sided bag, you get the papers. I don't know how the newspaper publishers got away with this, but I was a 13-year-old kid basically running my own business. I would do the sales, the marketing, I did all the collections, and all they had to do was drop the paper off at a 13-year-old kid's house, and I ran with the rest of it. But it was a really good learning experience. And I remember my very first day, I inherited the route from my brother, so I had covered for him a few times. It wasn't my very first time doing the route, but it was the first time on my own. I set my alarm for 4 in the morning. I got up, unwrapped the papers, hand folded each one of them at the house before I left, put them in the plastic bag because this is Oregon, in the middle of the spring, so of course it's raining. Rode my bike down to the route, and it was kind of broken up into 3 sections. It had sort of like 4 unit apartments on both sides, so you could run down these little walkways and deliver the papers side by side. The second one was larger, kind of collection of houses, often with a gate that I would have to open the gate, walk up to the door, set it on the porch. And the third section was a 3-story apartment complex. So I would have to walk up each of the stairs and deliver each of the papers. So between folding, bagging, biking to each of those stops, running up and down the stairs, going up and down the doors, I think it took me an hour and a half to 2 hours to deliver the 60 some odd papers that I had. And as I biked home, so proud of myself that I did it on my own, walked in the door, the phone's ringing, and it was a customer that I had missed one of the deliveries. So despite all of that time and effort, I still had a pissed off customer. I had a customer with a bad client experience, as we would call it today. And I think that lesson is really interesting because fast forward 6 years later, after having the route for every morning, getting up every single day, I would pick up that paper 7 days a week, 365 days a year, every single holiday, unless I got a buddy of mine to cover me for a vacation, which maybe once a week, a year. I would get up at about 5:30, grab the bag, put it straight into my pouch, bike to the beginning of the route, sprint through all through one of those sections, would be folding, bagging, and throwing between each door, perfectly hitting each of the mats. I could throw it without going through the gate on the gated doors, and I could throw it perfectly to each of the 3rd floor, 2nd floor, or 1st floor apartments, and did the route in 30 minutes with perfect delivery to 83 customers because I had built the route up by 23 clients by the end of the 5-6 years. So as I think about what I did in that time from 13 to, I guess it was only actually 4 years, about 17, the same principles apply to what I think I'm doing as a 1099 coach today. And it's not about folding papers and throwing them, but the model that I want to share with you, the models that I want to share with you today are just as applicable to that situation as they are to your coaching today. And if you really want to take it far enough, it's any relationship that you have in your life. All right, so with that as the context, I'm the one controlling. I want to go back slightly to the presentations that I've given over the years. The first one was from Ray Dalio's book Principles, and this is the learning loop. I talked about this in the context of coaching excellence, where we're constantly setting audacious goals, failing, improving, learning, improving, and setting more audacious goals, striving towards our cosmic potential. Last year, I talked about trust. And this really started with corporate leadership training that I went to about 5 years ago, shortly before I quit my job. And a huge theme of the leadership presentation was that trust is the foundation of any relationship. And the recommendation from that class was to start simply by paying attention to trust. And I noticed with my coworkers, colleagues, and people working for me, when I started paying attention to it, I could feel it, but I didn't know what that meant. So I started geeking out on trust. I started reading everything I could about trust and started off with finding my favorite definition and model for trust as trust being the willingness to be vulnerable with someone else who could have consequence on you. So your clients are trusting you. Your people in your life, your relationships, they are trusting you with some sort of vulnerability. And it's a continuous choice over time. And the paper that used this definition, it ended up being a meta-analysis of all trust research that had been done for like 30 previous years, came up with 3 factors of trust. And these are perceived factors of trust. So this trust, this choice to be vulnerable is your client, for example, choosing to hire you based on their perceived ability, of their perception of your ability, or can you, as their coach, help them accomplish their goals? Will you? Do they perceive you as having integrity to follow through on what you say you're going to do? And I think ultimately, are you consistent in your relationship? And benevolence, do they care? And this doesn't mean are they nice, it's do they care. Some of the meanest, some of my bitches I've ever met in my life have also been the ones that care the most about me. My high school choir teacher, I remember, was just an ornery, precise, high expectation teacher that we all knew he loved each one of us and wanted the best of us. He wanted to get the best performance out of it. So it doesn't mean you have to be nice, but they do need to perceive that you care about their outcomes. And what's also interesting, I was looking at our core values the other day that I think actually perfectly align with this. Our ability enables growth, integrity is consistency, and benevolence is connection, our 3 core values. Growth, consistency, and connection align really well with the factors of trust. So that's what I talked about last year. This year, I want to talk about how to apply those 2 models to a third model, which some of you may be familiar with, this 3-factor model for business. So in any business, there's 3 elements that must exist in order for it to continue as a going entity. A product is going to have some sort of cost, a price, and a perceived value by the client. And you can imagine these, you can play with pins or straws. In the book I read initially, it was, imagine 3 straws on the table, and you can move those straws around to orient the product that you're trying to evaluate. And at all times, at any time, if the 3 legs of your business aren't in this order, where cost is less than price is less than value, you are not going to have a successful business. Because if cost is more than price, what do you have? Or what don't you have? You don't have any profits.
Cost, you're referring to the cost of delivery?
Correct. Cost of operations. Or what's cost in our case, really?
Coaching.
It's our time, from Matt's perspective, it's what we pay the coaches. From our perspective as a coach, it's our time. It's how much time are we going to spend? So if our time and the price that our client is paying, if those get out of whack, this no longer becomes really a profitable venture. And if the client's perceived value becomes less than the price, what happens?
They don't buy it.
They quit. They churn. So we always have to have these 3 elements. And, interesting. Mine got out of whack too from the presentation. Yeah. I wonder if this is converting it to PowerPoint or something.
It is. We converted it to PowerPoint.
Was in slides.
Where's that supposed to be?
Slides.
No, but where's the profit thing supposed to be?
Well, it's supposed to be in there, but it was very carefully organized with painstaking detail and graphic
Hour, 15 minutes worth of
page, graphically designed this, and so anywho, cost. The difference between cost and price is going to be your profit. Oh, and so I just gave it away, but often in the books, what you'll hear is the difference between price and value is going to be either brand or goodwill, are kind of the two elements of that. What I would argue, what I'm arguing in this model is that it's trust. That I think what we invest in to push perceived value further to the right, to increase the client's perceived value, my argument is that it's trust. And why is that important? Well, because what I wanted to do with this presentation is try to take it from my last two lectures, which were very conceptual and kind of nebulous, and deconstruct that into concrete things that we can do as coaches to improve the value that we add to our clients' experience. Now, essentially what Nick talked about this morning was using the learning loop to reduce your cost or your time as a coach. Do a time audit. For me, I use Clockify about once every other month or so. I will record how much time I'm spending down to the second with each video breakdown for every single client so that I know exactly how much dollar per hour I'm spending on each client. And that's great. You can push that down to a limit, but eventually you run into, like Matt talked about, if you're doing a 25 second video feedback, or if you're only spending 5-10 seconds, then you start to put at risk the amount of value that you're putting into the equation. But what I want to talk about is how to apply the learning loop to pushing the value equation to the right. But just like my story with the paper route, just because I'm spending more time on it doesn't necessarily mean I'm adding more value. I spent a ton of cost that morning on the paper route. My cost bar was way over the $1.50 a month that my clients would pay. And my value bar was below the price because I didn't even deliver the paper to the client. So they're not mutually exclusive to increase value while also decreasing cost. If you do it right, doing Nick's time audit and thinking about reducing your cost can enable you to add more value. But what I want to talk about specifically in this lecture is how to apply the trust equation to this business model graphic over time to think about improving the amount of value you can add to your client. So my argument is, and this is in the literature as well, that at the beginning of a relationship, perceived ability is the most dominant factor in a relationship, in a trust relationship. And I think the same is true in coaching. The reason somebody hires me initially is because they perceive my ability to be worth the $225 a month. And that's largely built on the brand that we've created with Barbell Logic. I think that's largely, or that is influenced by me putting my training on Instagram. You asked why should I keep doing Instagram? I've recently come to the decision that posting my training stories and the occasional post is a deposit in the ability factor of the trust equation, because I know my clients follow me. I know they see me. They've told me multiple times, I didn't want to train today, but I saw you training in your jeans in between meetings, and I said, all right, I'm going to go do it. I saw Andrew doing it. The more clients I'm picking up lately, even the CEOs of a business, they're on there, they're quiet, they're passive. Occasionally they'll comment, but they're watching me. Our current and potential clients are my current and potential clients are who I'm speaking to with my Instagram presence. And it's thinking about this model. Over time, I think that perceived ability changes. I think that its relationship to the other factors decreases a little bit. So more concretely, I used to think that if I didn't leave a workout telling my client what they needed to fix, that I wasn't doing my job. If I didn't point out some error. And over time, I find that to be less and less true. There will be video feedback that I give in which I don't even comment on their lifting. I'll be chatting about some sort of story, or I'll see something happening in the background. I might give them positive reinforcement for something I think they did well. I'll comment on their bar speed. I'll talk about what I'm doing with their programming next week. But I don't feel the pressure to rely only on demonstrating my ability to the client because of the other factors involved. The second one is integrity, and my argument is that I think integrity is the constant. Integrity is why we have the 24-hour clock. The 24-hour clock is not just because we say we're going to give our feedback in 24 hours, but it's because that is us showing up consistently every single time a client posts a workout. We're going to be there to provide them feedback. We're going to be there 7 days a week, 365, within 24 or 48 hours. It feeds into this integrity model. Integrity is also consistency. I had a period of time where I was drinking too much coffee before my feedback, and I was getting way jacked up in some of my videos, and then other days I wouldn't have the coffee, and so my personality was all over the place, and I think that was eroding integrity. And I've actually had the experience as a client where the behavior over time with my coach was not consistent to the point where I essentially stopped trusting my coach, that they had I stopped trusting or choosing to be vulnerable with that particular coach because their behavior was so erratic. And it's nobody at Barbell Logic, by the way. But it was, as I look back on it in time, it was that their integrity decreased over time.
Hey, Andrew. What's interesting, I think, we've seen is that inconsistent integrity is worse than low integrity than consistent low integrity. So if you've ever gone to, you got one there?
Well, I've got a good example of that.
Okay.
A concrete example.
Yeah, I think by going to a hotel, if you've ever gone to like a mom and pop hotel or something, or a restaurant, and you've had incredible service, and you're like, this is amazing. And the next time or 2 times there, you go back and the service sucks. It's like a huge letdown.
Right.
Where like there are restaurants in town we go to just get quick food or whatever, and you're like, it kind of sucks all the time, but you're going because
you
it's
expect
cheap.
it.
The integrity is low, but it's consistent.
Well, right, and the
Which is
price and
actually
the
better
perceived
than
value
That's right.
are aligned.
That's right.
For that business model, it works.
And you, without calling coaches out by name, one of the things that you've done and Carl has done is you've identified the coaches who struggle with their integrity does this.
Yeah.
Instead of like whether it's here or here,
Right.
it's just not consistent.
Well, we also have an interesting example on the on-time delivery thing, where we have a coach who's consistently one of our lowest OTD coaches, but he's exactly the same missed OTD.
Right. He's 90%.
He's at 27 hours instead of 24 hours.
Right.
So his clients, though, expect him to do, he still does his
So
feedback
his churn is low.
at the same time. His churn is really low.
But it's not inconsistent.
Exactly. He's extremely consistent, but late by exactly 3 hours. The third factor is not in the room. Benevolence, in my opinion, and this is all this part is all just how I perceive it and think about it. I think benevolence becomes the most dominant factor the longer you have a client. And this is that connection piece, the relationship that you build. The client keeps coming back because you've invested so much in that relationship that they perceive that you care about them to the point that it outweighs. It's not like you're becoming technically that much better of a coach over the course of 2, 3, 4 years. Although I think there's an aspect of that. I think you could argue, like I said, at different times, I'm showing here like maybe your skills because of a client gets injured, and now the ability for you to coach somebody through an injury pops up to become really important. But over time, benevolence, I think, becomes one of the biggest, if not the most important factor. So the sum total of those, as I showed in the previous slide, is trust. And the reason that I think it's important to factor in time and their relative importance is that the way I think about trust is that it's something that I constantly want to be building. I constantly want to be pushing that value leg of the triangle to the right. And I can do that by thinking about it in these 3 different buckets. I can invest in my ability, my skills as a coach, by getting coached, by broadening my breadth of experience, of things that I can demonstrate, by showing the client more. In the last year, just to put this into context, I haven't lost a strength client in over a year. I have reached a PR of 40 clients. That's the most I've ever had, 13 of which are also nutrition clients. I have recently lost 2 nutrition clients, but they're still my strength clients. I've clocked myself at $180 an hour the last time I did Clockify. And I think it's largely because of applying this model. And in particular, one specific example I'll give is that for years, I remember seeing in our NPS feedback, I wish my coach would explain to me what they're doing with my programming. And I always thought, because for me, many, many years, programming was a Sunday slog for however many clients I had to sit down and crank through those clients as fast as I could. And I thought, there is no way in hell I can take time to explain what's going on with the programming, all the decisions that they make. I would say now, more than half of my video feedback, which averages 3 to 5 minutes per video, is explaining what I'm doing with the program. And it's because of this model. I want them to show it's not just good enough to have the ability, they need to perceive the ability. So I'm talking to them while I'm providing my feedback about what they're doing technically, what I like about what they're doing, what I think they could focus on or work on, and what I want them to work on next time, and why I'm programming the exercises, the sets, and the reps, and the weight for the next session. And I'm doing that video by video, workout by workout. So every single session, they know what I'm thinking about their next week. They see what I'm seeing, and they're learning what I'm doing. Yes, sir.
So I think I see where you're going. You're going to do the integral of
Here it
trust.
comes. Here it comes.
Right? But I have to say I'm a little bit bothered. So I see that benevolence is a function.
Sure.
You're going to integrate
Yep.
that into the final integral. Ability is a function. You're going to integrate that.
Sure.
But integrity is a constant.
Sure,
Right?
that's
so
fair.
if integrity is a constant, it's not really a lever that you can use, is it? Or can you raise,
Can you raise your integrity?
Can you raise your integrity?
This is just, again, this is my theory. Yes, it's a constant in this graph. But I think, here's what I will do. On integrity, this has been my experience, and it's been super helpful for me because I used to have a reaction to what I see now as integrity situations that was very emotional and reactionary, but I couldn't put a finger on it. And I'll give you recent example. I had to change a meeting that was scheduled with one of my clients because I was out of Wi-Fi at the time that it was scheduled. And I now perceive that as integrity going down. So I think what I was trying to show here was like the relative impact. Mm-hmm. But I think that integrity there's 3 things that can happen with trust. Either you can be building trust, eroding trust, or cashing in on trust. When I moved that meeting, I was cashing in on trust. That's how I saw it, as a decrement to integrity. And so what that does now, instead of it just being an emotional reaction like I feel bad, this model drives me to take action that I know I need to make probably a 7-to-1 deposit of positive integrity, consistent interactions with that client, not to redeem myself, but I borrowed this thought from John Gottman's literature. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but the Love Lab guy out in Seattle. His observation of healthy marriages is that there's a 7-to-1 ratio from a negative relationship interaction to a positive relationship interaction. So that 7-to-1, I'm sort of borrowing from that and applying to this integrity model that if I have a situation where I cash in on trust, I try to deposit 7
chips for everyone you can.
7-to-1, yeah, exactly. 7-to-1 positive interactions. Yep.
Well, I would make the argument that doesn't maintain integrity. You get a little blip.
You get a
and then
blip,
it pops
Right, exactly.
So when I worked in custom suiting, as you can imagine, we deal with a lot of like weddings or big deadlines for other things. And the clients that we always had to put out the worst fires for because we would miss a deadline. There was an integrity opportunity.
Yes.
We're going to cover you on this. We're
Yes.
going to do this extra
Exactly.
thing. And those are always the most fiercely loyal clients. And so it's a blip with a big potential for a bump.
Yep.
Where as long as your integrity actually merits that perception of your integrity, that's where it can really
Yes.
increase for you. So
That's a great point, and I probably should draw that with some examples of that because I see that a lot in my own coaching. I won't get their program in time or something, or I'll miss the 24-hour clock, or I'll forget to make the programming change I said I was going to make, and I immediately recognize that in this model as an integrity hit.
Yeah, I think the power of the model is enhanced if it's not necessarily a concept but another function to integrate.
Yes, I agree, and that's what I'll show. I think what breaks it, what I think I misfired with this image is that I think integrity is a constant in its importance to the relationship, whereas ability and benevolence change a little bit. But I see what you're saying. It should have some variation to it. to demonstrate that.
If I'm reading this correctly, this is kind of a generalized picture or model for one client's position. If somebody has had a poor relationships with coaches in the past who they feel don't listen to them or something,
Yeah.
benevolence might be very high from the very beginning.
It might.
Integrity might be very high from the very beginning. So it'll be different for each client.
Yes.
How that changes over time.
Yes, correct. Yes, then I think, again, you guys I love these questions because what I'm hearing you doing is using the model to apply it to how you want to choose to make decisions. It's not that this is exactly right. This is trying to convey an idea, but I think this model is really useful. And Sully is a genius because he saw right through it. We're going to do some calculus. So one of the favorite things I learned from my dad is that calculus is really just a cool way of doing super basic math. Each one of these little bars here is an increment of time measured up to a height of trust. So the difference of time here, the sum total of trust that you can build with the time that you have with your client is simply an addition of these rectangles, height of which is trust, width of which is delta t, which let's just say hypothetically for the purpose of this example is one video review. That's 3 to 5 minutes of time. So my argument is, and my mental model is, how much trust can I build in 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, 16 times a month, over and over and over again?
I think there's a change too in the time, like when we had a 3-month contract, you had 3 months to build trust.
Maybe it was 3 months.
Now that there's no contract, you have 4 weeks.
Now, what calculus does is say, what happens if we make that delta t infinitesimally small, infinitely small? And we could measure the amount of change of trust because calculus is ultimately the study of continuous change. How accurate can we make that line? And how accurate can we make that sum total? If you're thinking about it from Nick Hammer's presentation this morning, how finely can you measure that 3 to 5 minutes such that you are maximizing the trust you build every single second? That's my arete. That's my excellence. My excellence is, what can I do to make every single fraction of a second of my interaction with my client maximal trust building interaction? What that looks like mathematically is that value is the integral of trust, which is the integral of the sum of ability, time, benevolence over time. And how can you find more ways to show your client trust? Show your client trust. You can't just be the best coach. You've got to show that you're the best coach for that client. You need to show them you can, you need to show them you will, and that you need to show them that you care. That's why I post my videos on Instagram. That's why I do split screen with their calendar. It's not because I think it's the best way to do it. Everybody can do it. The idea is that I'm using it as a tool to communicate what I'm doing for their program. You do it your way. Go back to this model and you figure out what your way of building the most trust possible is. But for me, that's having their calendar up and their workout up, and I'm talking to their lift. I text Matt away. I'll give you guys a little secret here. I thought I came up with a way to watch their videos at 2x speed and still provide them good feedback. And it works if I'm doing text only and I'm not doing a screen recording, like an emergency situation. But I came back to doing the real-time video reviews because I couldn't get the trust equation to work. Because I think I can add more value with a 3 to 5 minute video where I'm reacting, like you said, to their lifts. Because then they get a genuine, they get the integrity, a high integrity interaction. Because it's a real-time like, hell yes, nice, you got it. Yes, right there. Like they can see me being me in reaction to their video. So I experiment. I'm constantly doing that learning loop. I'm going to try the 2x model and see if that worked. And the reason I found it, I was doing some text-only feedback. I had low Wi-Fi, so I hit the 2x and I was like, damn, I'm doing these in like 30 seconds. This could be pretty rad.
1.25.
1.25. 1.25 works. I have been able to pull off 1.25 speed, and I'll tell you, actually, here's an interesting interaction of this model. I hired Jordan Stanton specifically about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago maybe, after hiring Matt. It's not because I fired Matt. I hired Matt because I wanted to PR on my lifts, and Matt got me PRs on all of my lifts. Lifetime PRs, probably my last PRs, but we'll see. I hired Jordan Stanton because I wanted to learn velocity-based training, so tee him up for his next presentation. What I learned most about velocity-based training was not to use the cable on every single lift, but it's how the bar speed changes through a set. And now I watch my videos not to see the absolute magnitude of bar speed change, it's the relative bar speed change from rep 1 to rep 5. And you can watch that, it's linear, so you can watch that at 1.25, 1.5, or even two times. If you're doing a 1 RM, it's a little bit hard. You still probably want to watch that at full speed. But if you're watching a set, what you need to watch is going from rep 1 to rep 5. So by pushing up my ability, I was able to drive the cost lever down because I was able to be more efficient about watching my clients' videos, because now I can watch them at 1.25. Think about that.
Your cost lever.
My cost lever.
Without reducing value.
Still adding actually more value to the client, because now I'm talking to them about their bar speed and I'm programming them differently, because now I will anticipate programming changes for their next workout based on how the rate of bar speed change from 1 to 5, not whether or not they just got or failed the set. So I can program better, I can provide them better feedback, and I can do the review faster. Think about taking 25% off of every single video that you watch. It doesn't sound like much, and it might only be 3 or 4 seconds per video, but that is a hell of a lot of time if you're doing 2 million videos or whatever it was that you quoted this morning. So that's the formula.
I would just point out that in your second integral, integrity is not a constant, it's a function.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Indeed. Now, if I were to actually be solving the previous slide, the first thing I would do is turn that into a constant. It would spit out of the integral, da-da-da. But anyways, I'm not actually going to go that far. But the takeaway, how can I maximize trust per unit time for my client? That's the most powerful mental change that I've made, and I think it's why I've been able to increase my client count by 33% during a recession and optimize my hourly wage to $180 an hour at its peak. It's not always 180. I'm not trying to hit 180. It's just what I've measured when doing time studies. More importantly, I'm trying to do this, and the output. This is how I like to use metrics. Metrics are a measure of the output of the process. My process is this. I know that this process works because it's the most number of clients I've had, and I'm working the same amount of time and increasing my dollar per hour rate. And that's all I got.
I really like the maximizing trust per unit time, but I think it works out to be the same thing. So your hourly rate's $180 an hour, but if you are minimizing churn, think about your monthly rate.
Right.
If you maximize your trust, those are 5 clients you did lose in the recession.
Exactly.
Which is a lot more.
Well, yeah. So on that note, on the question earlier today that came up, how do I get more clients? I got 3 that I'm coaching in person on through TKC, the in-person program that everybody has available to. I got 3 from networking with Tanner, and I consider that part of showing ability. Get out there. We live in an online world, but be out there in your worlds, in your whatever your worlds are. If it's the pain science world, see if you can connect with people there. If you're in the chicken cooking world, Cam's going to talk to us about how he connects with people that way. I got 3 from referrals. So that's delivering maximal trust, and not only that, retaining them, but they became my biggest cheerleaders. The Refer-a-Fin program was huge. Like, those were easy sales. And when I list these 3 people, it's not like I was going out selling. I'm just out there connecting with people, trying to network and demonstrate my value. The last 4, I know that's going to add up to 12, but the 3 in person I'd kind of had cooking for a while. But I got 4 through Find a Coach. And that's totally passive. And that, as far as I can tell, it was once I changed that first 2 lines of my bio, they started rolling into the point where I had to say no mas. I was on vacation and I got 2 from Find a Coach and was like, I got to shut this off. This is crazy. So the traffic's there. Put yourself out there, maximize trust, and retention becomes a huge part of that. I wouldn't be at 40 if I didn't have 0 churn.
Well, for all of you who are coaches, you're trying to, there's 2 layers of this, of the cost, price, value equation. It's your cost, your price, and the value you get out of it as a coach,
Yep.
and then also what your client gets.
Yep.
And for the business, for us, there's 3 layers deep. It's what we pay the coaches, what the cost is to actually provide the online coaching, right? Like Warren Buffett says, the cost is what you pay, the value is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And so to try to make sure all of those 3 match up so that what the business pays and what the business gets is value,
Mm-hmm.
what the coach gives in time and what the coach gets in pay and in meaningful life is value, and what the client pays and what the client gets is value. It becomes 3 layers
Yeah.
deep and so much more complicated. It's all still the same stuff.
And the last one thing I want to go back to that I think you really picked up on, Sully, that I think is important about this model and the time aspect of it is that I used to think that it was binary, like either I had integrity or I didn't, or I had trust or I didn't. It's fluid. It can go up and down. Like you can lose it, and that can be an opportunity to get it back. When that paper route customer, I missed the delivery, but then I got right back on the bike and I had the paper to him in 5 minutes. And so he's like, okay, you're a good man. You came back. You lived up to your word. I handled the call well. Like I got chewed out, and I was like, yes, sir. I'll be right down there.
Having a better relationship.
Yeah, so
integrity goes up.
integrity actually goes up for that. So to me, that time element and the ability for trust to go down and come back up was actually a relief, because it gave me, instead of an emotional reaction, it gave me concrete action that I could apply this model and choose to take steps to address that.
Integrity is a tricky thing, though, because your ability can go up and down. Caring, I guess, can go up and down, but there is a barrier to recovery
Yes.
with integrity. So that's a
You
complex
can't cross the
function.
line and have the integrity
Complex
drop to 0.
It's
Just as much as you can recover, like Tanner said, and have integrity actually recover higher than it was before, you can also cross the boundary and go have the
Point of
integrity
no
drop to
return.
nothing.
Yeah.
As
Be like, I'm out.
I had a roommate in the Navy that is this old contractor. I'm 22, and he was trying to give me advice, and he was talking about the golden thread of trust in marriage, and like once it's broken, it's definitely hard to repair. And I think integrity is the one that snaps it the most. Like that's hard to recover from once you've lost that connection. But it's why I actually react to, in some ways, integrity, like that meeting reschedule. I am hypersensitive to those now. I don't just think about it as, oh, I just need to reschedule a meeting. I think of it as, that's an integrity opportunity that I need to take very seriously. If I reschedule that meeting too many times, if I miss too many check-ins, if I don't update the program enough times, those are serious degradations to trust, and that value line starts coming down with economic pressures. I don't know, maybe it seems trivial, but I take those little integrity moments as a huge opportunity.
Not to complexify your model, but it seems like there's a point at which, as you just pointed out, churn, where there's a memory to trust. There's the recent maybe 30-day, 15-day, whatever is the how high has that been? How many hits have you been able to cash in on? And a threshold for churn, where if trust drops below a certain level, the difference between value and price no longer seems worth it.
It's when if the value or the trust dips below their perception of however 225 is to them.
Yeah, so there's the trust itself, and then there's how much trust they have to have in you recently in order to be willing to stick around.
Right.
There's a certain amount you can cash in. It might go down, but they'll give you some wiggle room.
Yep.
But eventually, if it stays down below that threshold for too long, you lose them.
Yep.
So that's where I think, like benevolence, the benevolence that you build up, the caring, the relationship part of it, can help buoy you through times when there might be a lapse in the ability of.
That's really what I was trying to show with this graph, is that it's hard to continuously show you have more ability. it's hard to show you. If you can, there's ways you can do it. Like I said, you deal with an injury, you deal with a life situation. They want to pursue a different sport that maybe you're familiar with, rucking, or they want to do a pull-up and you want to help them. So you can't. That's what I was trying to demonstrate there. Is there's little blips of opportunity where you can show more ability. You can invest in a broader range of skills. But the one that I think builds the buffer, the most buffer over time, is the care. And I forgot to mention, Block has ways to help us with that. The one that I go to all the time is the card. Anytime a client has something that is happening in their personal life, send them a card. And you have to judge the character. Not every
The birthday reminders was, I think that's just
The
huge.
birthday
It's
reminder.
just huge.
Yes. The missed workout notification is about benevolence.
Hey dude, what's up?
Exactly.
You okay?
It's 2 lines. Send them a note. It takes 30
Turn off
seconds.
the missed workout notification, and I get it. Those extra notifications are a pain in the ass. But to send 4 words, hey, checking in on you, is everything okay?
Is everything okay?
That's benevolence.
Yes.
And it took 5 seconds to type that and hit enter.
Yes.
And I did that yesterday morning. I had a guy, I was like, kind of fell off the wagon for 10 days. He's like, man, I had, it was a construction company. All his guys kind of called in sick. He worked 80 hours a week. He's like, I just felt actually was Brittany, it's your new nutrition client as well. And he was like, I just need help getting back on the wagon.
Yep.
Cool, we'll do that.
Here we go. Let's just change
People are
the name.
embarrassed about it. They're embarrassed when they miss a week. Or like, it's okay, I've been there, I've fallen off the wagon, I'll help you get back on. Let's do 2 workouts in a row, they're gonna be really good. I'm gonna make sure I'm not gonna crush you on the weight.
And
that doesn't take any time.
Yeah, and so earlier you said we were working on the app helping people be as efficient as possible. I think about the app as helping you build as much trust as possible. It's the 24-hour notification clock. It's the missed workout notification. It's the birthday reminders. It's the cards that you can click on the Help Scout icon. In 3 clicks, you can have a card sent to their note or to your client with a personalized handwritten note. It's the refer a friend to help you go get more clients. Like, it's all part of how do we build more trust.
Programming templates and make you look like
Program-
a smarter coach. More ability.
In less time.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. All right, I'm going on too much, but hopefully that's a useful model, and
Thanks, man.
there we go.